We're 4 minutes in. I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. So, welcome to another Wildsparq executive live session. I'm so excited to have our guest Luke Goetting with us today to talk about bridging the generational gap and how do we manage Gen Z, millennials, along with baby boomers in the age of AI. Before I introduce Luke, there are some of you who have joined us today who are not familiar with Wildsparq. And to those of you, we say welcome. Thank you for joining us. And if you don't know who Wildsparq is, we are an online system to help companies develop teams that supercharge their business. We believe that if you can transform your leaders, you will transform your business. And so we offer a comprehensive system to help you identify where you need to grow, develop leaders where it matters, and activate leaders to drive real business growth. It's enough about Wildsparq. I want to introduce Luke so he can get into his topic because I'm extremely excited about it. So Luke is a leading future of work expert and global keynote speaker. He's added value and had talks at hundreds of events worldwide. He also is the host of Gen Z at Work podcast, is an active management consultant. What I love about Luke's talks and his conversations is they're super informative, but Luke is also an incredibly entertaining guy. So y'all are going to have a good time. You're going to learn a lot. Let me bring Luke to the stage. Luke, thanks for joining us, man.
What's up, y'all? Yeah, thanks for having me, David. I'm gonna try to lean into my hot take. And I'm not sure. I feel like sometimes we temper our hot takes. So we'll call it lukewarm appropriately. I find, especially as leaders, we do a disservice to the rest of our team members when we talk about AI and just these all-encompassing perspectives. I have found it's extremely useful to talk about AI in specific lenses, almost as if almost on a departmental level, the same way that we talk about the rest of our business. Again, it just helps clarify and specify what we're trying to do and who we're trying to do it for, as opposed to these really grandiose AI conversations that can leave people feeling perplexed rather than informed. How's that?
That's great. I totally agree more. I think that there's a lot of opinions around AI, a lot of fear, a lot of confusion. But at the end of the day, I think if it's used correctly, it can improve people, improve business, and optimize existing systems and operations. But Luke, I'm gonna hop off. I'm gonna let you take this. I'll hop back on once it's time for us to interact again. But without further ado, take it away, man.
Cool. Thanks so much. Obviously, I cheated because this is the lens I'm going to be presenting AI in. So there's my hot take. We're going to be talking about knowledge transfer, the great knowledge acceleration, bridging generations in the AI era. We're going to take this a little bit of a journalistic style, kind of who, what, where kind of thing. And we'll also try to do a bit of audience participation today. Obviously, please keep throwing your comments in the chat. And also, we might even find another tool or two that we can use throughout today's session. But I think it's important, as with almost everything, to start with the why for today's conversation. I'm going to lay out what I believe is some pretty incredible factors hitting us as leaders in the workforce right now. And there's a not insignificant number of them. First one, when it comes to our workforce and our organizations, there is a stretching of the workforce like never before. The people and workers aged 65 and older, that group has doubled since the 1980s. And the 75 plus age range is actually the fastest growing cohort in the workforce. So we have people, and we have a range of team members and employees and contributors, 60 years, 80 years difference of when people have entered the workforce, all the way from almost nearing Gen Alpha starting to the workforce, to the silent generation. So yes, a pretty incredible and a new situation that we're dealing with in that context. And they're off coming out. It's going to be a photo finish. There's no really reason for me to do that. I just like to liven that slide up as I present a graphic. This is a chart of the workforce as it currently stands, just to give you a sense from a generational perspective. You can see millennials are actually the most prevalent, followed by Gen X. Gen Z overtook the baby boomer generation just last year, which is a surprise to many people. And then baby boomers fourth. We do have a small percentage of the silent generation also in the workforce. One other major thing that we need to be aware of when it comes to knowledge transfer at our organizations is the impending retirement actively taking place of our baby boomer generation contributors and leaders at our organizations. 11,000 baby boomers hit retirement eligibility daily in the United States. So yes, this is an impending knowledge transfer crisis, and every baby boomer, the entire generation, will be eligible for retirement by 2030, representing 30 million people over the course of that duration. So yeah, the clock is ticking on that front. Meanwhile, we have an increasing percentage of our workforce at a macro level being comprised of digital natives. They actually make up almost 2/3 of the workforce. And digital natives, I'm typically talking about Gen Z and millennials. But one other challenge is these are generations who tend to have relatively high turnover rates, on average between 2 and 3 years at organizations. So obviously from a knowledge transfer perspective, that also can play a pivotal role, a challenge in communicating among our teams. And then I emphasize there digital natives, because these are generations that have a tendency to seek digital tools first, as opposed to connecting with their manager, connecting with their manager's manager, walking down the hallway, if they even work in an office at all. So again, that can represent a bit of a challenge if we're talking about sharing among our organizations. Unfortunately, many organizations are ineffective when it comes to knowledge transfer. It is estimated that roughly 40% of the knowledge at our organizations, it's right up here in our brains and pretty much not documented anywhere else. So that's a major risk in itself. And then you pair that with recent data showing that of baby boomers who have retired, only roughly 1 in 5 is reporting that they have been debriefed and the organization sought out their knowledge about how the organization works. Only 1 in 5. So yes, a lot of orgs are not great at knowledge transfer as it currently stands. And then we enter the world of AI and all the potential implications and all the real confusion around this new technology, this new tool, that could either, in my opinion, exacerbate this divide potentially between the digital native generations and other generations, or, and you may have guessed that this is kind of where I stand on the topic, be a major contributor and enhancer of our capabilities on that front. So these are the 5 factors that I wanted to point out as our why as we start to dive into today's session. And this is my big scary number. 47 million. I know that lacks a little bit of context here, but every good talk needs a big scary number. This is the amount of money lost by large organizations in the US due to inefficient knowledge sharing. But again, that's pretty meaningless to us on an individual level. So I wanted to bring you to another scary number that I think will be much more relatable, which is that knowledge workers and employees at our organizations on average waste 5 hours every single week, either waiting on vital information from their fellow coworkers or recreating resources that have already been created. Those inefficiencies can result in 20 to 30% potential revenue loss. So that, to me, feels much more relatable and concerning, obviously. So we want to address that today. Let me know again in the comments if that's feeling relatable to you. So that's our why. Real quickly, I want to give you a little more background on the who, both me and the generations in the workplace. This is a hilarious photo. This is actually me in that mascot-looking outfit. This was my my last internship in college, and then what ultimately became my first job. And this was called Motion Viewer Man. Basically, the situation was I was interning, I was still going to college, and the org said, hey, we have our big annual conference in Las Vegas. Do you want to come? And I'm like, yeah, obviously, yes. One catch. You have to be a mascot guy here for the whole trade show. And let me tell you, this thing was not easy to put on. It had this huge belt with a little fan generator kind of thing, weighed a not insignificant amount of pounds, and then the whole thing inflated around me. I think I saw through the smiley face there. Not to mention a sort of awkwardly placed camera component as it relates to the mascot. This was meant to be a motion sensor with a camera built into it. All that to say, I went through the whole process of putting this thing on behind our booth at the Las Vegas trade show. Took me probably 20 minutes. And within another 20 minutes of the trade show floor opening, our booth got slammed with people everywhere asking questions. And the president of our company came up to me and said, hey, get out of that thing and come help us out at the booth. So my era as Motion Viewer Man was short-lived, sadly. But through that job, I ended up going full-time with them. I ended up becoming the Midwest Territory Manager. And it was such a great experience to learn from other generations in the workforce. Not only my manager and the president of our org, but I had counterpart territory reps in the West Coast and in the Southeast and on the Northeast, in Canada and abroad in other countries as well. And so I got to work with all these different people toward a common goal, and we all shared our different insights on maximizing our opportunities and building better relationships with our clients. I tended to gravitate towards some of the technology, including creating high dynamics slide decks and sales resources and websites for our dealer network that were used throughout the organization. So yeah, it was a great experience and really set me off on my career, and now leads me to talk about this. I have a consultancy that works on this on a daily basis. David mentioned my podcast, and I do have a book coming out later this year about unlocking next-gen talent. As David mentioned, I've had the honor of speaking at many, many events around the world, including a TEDx last fall, where I capture these insights and am able to bring them to audiences like y'all. Enough about me. Let's talk about the generations real quickly. As I mentioned earlier, these are the 4 core ones that make up the significant percentage of the workforce. We got our baby boomers, we got Gen X, we got millennials, and we've got Gen Z, the newest entrant into the workforce. A few other honorable mentions. The generation preceding the baby boomers is the silent generation, ages 80 to 97. Still many of them in the workforce. And coming down the pipeline very soon, Gen Alpha. By the way, I just kind of flipped from Z back to Alpha. There was no ceremony or anything. It kind of feels underwhelming to me. I feel like there should have been something that flip over. But anyway, it didn't happen. And if you want a nice little nugget for your dinner parties, know that as of this year, 2025, we have a new entrant to the scene, Gen Beta. So yeah, I'm not trying to age everyone here, but we're already like 3-4 generations beyond the millennials and Gen X at this point. Now we are going to be talking about entire generations here, so this is my obligatory caveat. And I also want to let y'all know, I'll make sure that you have access to a cheat sheet that recaps a lot of the core elements that we discussed today, as well as the link to my podcast that we've alluded to a few times already. This is where I would love to get a little bit more information from y'all. I'm going to attempt to paste this in the chat as well. Oh, I'm trying to get, there we go. So let me see if I can send that over. Cool. So your options here, y'all, you can either scan this with your phone and you should be in a digital room, or I just pasted it in the chat as well. You should be able to just paste that link in your browser and be able to join our poll that way. Let's see if anyone's able to do that. I know we got to give them a little bit of time. Oh, we got some votes coming in. Awesome. While we're waiting for a few responses, and by the way, the question is, where is your org on its AI journey? While we're waiting on a few responses, just David, any reactions to those why factors that I mentioned a moment ago, or Alex?
I know those are great. I think, the lack of knowledge transfer once somebody leaves their role. I've experienced it. I know people in the listening in have experienced it. Stepping into a new role, maybe you're replacing that person who left, and the amount of time you spend the first 3 to 6 months in that job, like learning things that nobody documented,
Right. Yep.
be left behind for you. And so, as especially as somebody who's, at a director level at a company, just making sure that we record everything that we do. But how to that itself is also time consuming. So what tools do we have accessible to us to make that easier?
Yeah.
And
That's a great great allusion to what we'll get into in more depth for sure. Awesome. And we're getting some responses in. So let me bring that up quick. So where are people at? Oh, again, bring my screen share up again. So it looks like we actually have a pretty savvy group here who are already adopting at the departmental level or at the strategic level, even higher. Wow. Shout out to our attendees here. This is I've done this talk multiple times, and I'd say this is probably the most adoption I've seen. So again, kudos to y'all. We do have some people who are just using it on the individual level, tools like ChatGPT, and no one, as far as we can tell, has it banned, which is great news. Now I want to flip it over, and I'll give a little preview while I talk about this section. I want to really make sure we're prioritizing what y'all want to talk about today. And so I have made 3 different sections that we can cover. And I really want to make sure to prioritize it in the way that you would like to experience this content. Obviously, everyone comes from some different background, and they may have done a deep dive on some of these topics and not so much on other ones. So these are your 3 options. This should be live in Slido right now. We can talk about the generations and learn a little bit more about each of those generations and how we can best collaborate with them in the workforce. We can talk about human to human, old school. No, very relevant still today in 2025, mentorship strategies. And of course, as you may have figured out in the title, we can talk about AI accelerators to help us with those strategies for knowledge transfer and human to human using AI knowledge transfer components. All right, we've got some votes coming in. I'm going to bring that up again. We'll start to see our results sorting through. And real quickly, one of the cool things I did with this is that this is a ranking poll. So you actually rank them all 3 in order according to obviously what your interests are. The reason I share that and the reason I find it useful is because a lot of times you just have individual polls where you only get the idea of someone's favorite option, for example. Whereas with this, we actually have we're capturing different priorities, but from 2 through 5, for example. Obviously, in this case, just the first 3. So I really encourage you as leaders, when you're doing team strategy meetings or all hands kind of meetings, this can be a really cool way. This is a part of the reason why I wanted to share this tool with you, Slido. A really cool way to get some metric-based data as to how people are feeling, how bought in they are to these different concepts that maybe you're outlining or your teams are outlining. Awesome. Looks like we've had a bunch of people weighing in now. AI has jumped to the lead, followed by human to human and generations in the workplace. And that's big reason why I like to do this, is because I want to make sure to prioritize what you are most interested in here today. Great. So I'm going to close that down for now, and we will jump into AI strategies. That all worked pretty smoothly, by the way. So pretty excited. Thanks for jumping on that tool, y'all. All right. Oop, got to go back for a second. We chose AI strategies. Whoops. What am I doing? Great. So this is a modular talk. Every one of these sections is linked, and we are going to go to the one that y'all chose, which is AI strategies. And I have this fancy video graphic here, so you know it's pretty serious. We are all discovering AI solutions daily, it seems like. So please keep comments coming in that in the chat window, questions as well. Hopefully we can share insights together, because again, we are all very much, this is a wild west a little bit when it comes to these tools. So I'm hoping we can collaborate on this together. Quick disclaimer, I really enjoy collaborating with Wildsparq on these events, and I don't want to get thrown under the bus and banned from ever participating again. So make sure that when we're following through on some of these AI ideas, we are following our company policies and not just saying Luke told me to. I want to start with some quick hitting insights. And this is fascinating because I know we have a lot of leaders viewing and participating in this event. And I really want to emphasize this is cutting edge stuff. McKinsey, this is their 2025 AI report. It just came out a few months ago. And one of the most fascinating things to me is it reported that workers, employees, are using generative AI at 3 times the rate that their managers and org leaders perceive them as using AI. So yes, that is interesting. A lot more usage than many people actually realize, especially when we get to the upper rungs of an organization. And this is where it becomes especially fascinating. These same managers and org leaders are 2.4 times more likely to say the reason they haven't rolled out AI solutions is because of employee readiness. They don't feel their teams are ready to use these tools. But again, turns out they're actually using them at a much higher rate than they already know. And this is in contrast to them saying it's more on the strategic organizational side that we're not rolling out these tools. So something to think about. Your orgs, your teams, your employees may actually be using it much more and maybe more ready than you anticipate. Okay, so obviously when it comes to AI, we have a lot of different options here. And some of them we can do relatively quickly, and some of them are probably going to take a decent amount of organizational buy-in. So what I've tried to do today is actually just outline them according to 3 different tiers. Essentially, what I'm doing is saying what kind of readiness, what kind of implementation, and I want to start with the lowest hanging fruit today, things that you can start doing immediately that aren't going to require 20 IT meetings. So that's kind of your star symbolism on these different categories. Okay, the good news, y'all, is I think one of the most impactful is also the easiest to do, which is making sure we are capturing critical conversations from strategic employees at a minimum when they are leaving, whether it's a retirement, whether it's a promotion, whether it's a transfer, or ultimately someone leaving our organization. Obviously, many orgs, our instinct is to do an exit interview, and that's valuable, but that tends to be much more of a what could we tweak about our own organization rather than a knowledge transfer. And so I really want to encourage you, and probably it could be a separate meeting altogether, making sure when someone strategic at your organization is having one of those moments where they're departing, making sure you are dedicating hours, days to capturing their knowledge. And critically, tools that like otter.ai, transcription tools. So in general, I recommend starting with video or at least audio when we do the original capture, because there's so many tools I'll reference them throughout, and just to give you an idea of some categories, Microsoft and Teams has transcription tools, Otter.ai, where they will transcribe those insights. They will also start to strategically review them and create summaries and create different resources. And we'll talk about more how to manipulate that in just a second. But ultimately, critically, making sure that those resources, once we've gone through and vetted and curated, are ending up in our employee and our organizational knowledge bases for future people to access. David kind of alluded to it earlier in that, well, not, he didn't kind of allude, he did allude to it, where it is oftentimes so difficult when we're starting a new role because the person we most need to talk to just left. So if we do a great job of capturing their knowledge before they leave, then I find it is kind of 2025-y feeling that the person who might be of most value to us, even after they've left, is that person who originally had our role, because we can use AI to access the resources if we've been strategic about doing these knowledge capture sessions. Now, one quick note, you absolutely do not have to wait to do this until someone leaves. This is absolutely something you can be doing throughout their tenure and making sure you are capturing that wisdom and injecting it into your knowledge bases. But at a minimum, exit interview knowledge preservation. Also, looking at the start of someone being trained in. We share so much strategic insights in those first weeks and months with people. Obviously, if we're able to capture that, we can get more efficient and we can create more resources around that for future trainees to experience. So both at the start and let's just throw in the middle too. Basically, let's be doing these documentation processes throughout. One of the things, a subtle note here, I find it so much easier to record my knowledge verbally, whether it's on my cell phone or just speaking into my microphone on my computer, as opposed to sitting down and writing a guide. It's very unnatural. Most of us are not really good at that. And that's the beauty. We can talk through it and then use these AI tools to repackage it into whatever format we'd like. I know I spent a lot on that, but again, that is something you can do with any over-the-shelf type of tool pursuant to company policy. All right. Once we have those types of transcripts and resources, again, the brilliance is that we can use these AI tools and they don't have to be super advanced. I mean, I should be careful, not to say that ChatGPT and Claude and the various DeepSeeks aren't super advanced. They, of course, are. But again, they are the over-the-shelf, publicly facing available ones that you can do these types of things. So a point I like to make is starting, as I mentioned earlier, with audio or video, that you can use these tools to repackage them in any format you want. In most cases, actually, her binders here are a good example. In most cases, companies have very robust documentation. As an example, when I was creating training resources for my consultancy, I walked through various things that we do regularly, such as new client onboarding, how to lead a client meeting, how to go through our accounting software. And while I was really proud of those videos, they tended to clock in at 20 to 45 minutes, which is okay for someone just starting who has the time to look through that as part of their training. But if you need that in a pinch as a reminder, 6 months into your job, a 45-minute video is not going to cut it. So taking those videos, taking those insights and turning them into one-page, quick-hitting documents. And again, making sure those are all ending up in somewhere accessible for employees who need them throughout the organization. When we think about building our leaders and our leader base, looking at leadership protocols, what can we do? Again, there's a lot of knowledge that we oftentimes have. But how can we simplify quick hitting things that we can just refer to in a moment and come back to that? Another one I'm passionate about, actually looking at cross-generational communication guidelines and different ways that we might communicate and share information with someone who is from Gen Z versus a baby boomer. Now, speaking of Gen Z and digital natives, this isn't even necessarily AI, although I've already alluded to video as a critical part of these AI solutions for a bit here. I want to encourage you to leverage short form video. We know its popularity tools like TikTok and Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. But I would encourage you to think about this internally to connect with your employees, because those same principles apply. We can create some deep connections this way. So think more like your Slack or your Teams or your Facebook. What is it called? Workplace by Facebook. Like your internal social media tools. How can you use short form video to create deeper connections across your organization? Let me try this video. I know it's not always perfect when we're doing these screen shares. David, you can let me know if it works. If not, this one is conveniently subtitled, so it'll be very easy to follow along anyway. The point I want to make here before I play this video, is this is only 17 seconds long. And I want you to pay attention while you're watching this video to how much you experience in that 17 seconds.
As someone who's failed many times, it terrifies me. I don't want to fail. No one wants to be labeled a failure. But having failed enough, I learned that no one remembers my failures. I don't know, name any business person in the planet. Typically don't know their failures, but their successes.
Cool. Let me throw it back to you, David. One, did that audio work? And two, tell me, what did you experience when you watched that video?
Yeah, no, it worked great for me. I short form content is something that even as a marketing director, I'm like working on how do we get our content shorter and shorter, because that attention span is decreasing as we get more and more information flooding in to every way we get information. And so that short term is great. That video, I think the masterclass series video.
Yep, exactly.
They do a great job grabbing you the hook, setting up a quick problem, and then leaving you with a thought, which a good short form video should do.
Brilliant. Oh, and also I didn't even prep David for that, so he just knocked that out of the park. Just on his own, just with that brilliant marketing brain. Cool. So yeah, thanks for sharing that input. And yes, to David's point and to what I was sharing earlier, short form video, incredibly powerful. And then once you have that original, it is easy to create other resources from that. So let's continue on here. What I did on this particular one, I love this. Y'all are going to get a kick out of this. You probably didn't think humble old Microsoft Word was going to be making an appearance in my AI conversations. But I do want to give a shout out to Word because it has this dictate button, and you can either literally speak into your microphone and it'll create a transcript, or you can upload a video file such as the one that we just showed with Mark, or an audio file. And as you can see, it immediately spit out a summary of Mark's statements there, a transcript of those. And that's that transcript that I can now feed into my AI tool. In this case, I particularly enjoy using Claude, a very similar tool to a Chat GPT. And I said, okay, can you turn this into a one-page guide? And boom, it gets to work. And what manifests from that is a resource like this. Now, y'all are, based on the responses on the polls, y'all are already using AI at a decent clip. So this might not blow your mind. But again, think about it in the context, from the lens of knowledge transfer. That's where I think this is really mind-blowing, because so many of these resources are not super usable, not super easy to take on from an employee's perspective. So yes, creating short form video and then follow-up resources that can be text-based, micro trainings for new managers, knowledge transfer, testimonies of people who have gone through the experience and can share what they learned. That you're seeing me up there. Did I cut out there? for a
Yeah,
second?
cut up for a second on my end. I don't know how it was on the live side, but
I think I'm
go
back
back
now.
like
Is
a
that
few sentences. I think. No, yeah. You're good.
cool? Are you hearing me again, David? All good? Okay. I'm going to continue. Let me know if anything comes up again. But where would we be on a technical talk without some technical difficulties, right? But yeah, knowledge transfer testimonies, but also the demonstrations of the principles themselves. Again, I can't stress enough when you do a demonstration, the value that you get from watching a video versus reading some sort of text-based guide. It's almost one is extremely useful and one is nothing. There are millions of business books about leadership and about all kinds of strategies, and watching someone walk through it is incredibly different and especially valuable. This one is a little bit more subtle, and I'm not going to belabor it because the good news is you don't have to do a ton to actually leverage it. Simple knowledge mining, the idea that we can use tools like our existing knowledge bases, things like SharePoint or Alfresco, where traditionally our directories have used tags or even just simple file names as a way to analyze the content inside the knowledge base and recommend it to employees based on their search queries. As we all know, no one has the time to tag documents, and they quickly become outdated. And so this is really powerful. Check the good news again, check that your knowledge bases have these options to just start to mine the information you already have there. And it can start to give much more useful responses because it is actually analyzing the documents themselves rather than simply the titles or the tags. So obviously that can be used for anything when it comes related to file management. I'm especially intrigued by this idea of performance review analysis, where we can look at some of the top performing managers and leaders at our org and look at the way that they conduct their performance reviews around the organization with their direct reports. What's their style? How are they getting the most out of their teams and out of their employees? And I wanted to throw it, speaking of AI and leadership, I wanted to throw it to my pal David to speak a bit to a really cool offering on the horizon from Wildsparq.
Yeah, man. I appreciate the chance for the shameless plug in the middle of your talk.
This is a pure elegant integration with the content you're talking about. I don't know what you're saying.
I mean, even just the idea of like a knowledge transfer, not like data mining. A lot of our customers have said, I wish Wildsparq was just like a person who sat next to me all day and I could ask questions and hear what they have to say from a leadership standpoint when they're going into a tough conversation, or they just had a tough conversation, or they're thinking successionally, or maybe they're trying to come up with a great experience to give a customer or their employees. And so we listened to that. We said, let's develop a tool as a part of our promise to activate leadership skills that is basically Wildsparq as a personal coach in your pocket, that at any time you can turn to them and say, what does Wildsparq say about, I know we did a lesson about this 6 months ago. What do they say about this? How can I formulate this conversation, XYZ? And so, yeah, our leadership AI coach is on the horizon, late summer, for that to come out. But I wanted to take this chance while we're on the topic of AI to talk about the exciting things that Wildsparq is building and the solutions for giving business leaders to defeat the leadership dead end of ways to develop leaders that just aren't working and actually develop leaders in a way that drives results. And so this is one of those solutions, really activating leaders through an AI leadership coach. So excited about that, and hand it back to you.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, again, it's seamless with the principles that I share, which is in part why I think this partnership's been so successful. Because I think that what you just shared to me is so, again, it seems obvious, but maybe it's not. We go through these trainings, we learn a lot of incredible insights, But we also have a lot going on in our lives, professionally and personally, and some training we did 6 months ago, years ago. It's not always just ready to immediately bring up. So I love this idea of course, having simple quick hitting guides, but also being able to turn to an AI tool to say, hey, this is the situation I'm in. I'm sort of a little bit flustered from even just having gone through this experience. And can remind me, like, I remember this principle, I remember this situation that we walked through, remind me what that's all about. Boom. And we're starting to get into effective strategies to sort through that. It's just so powerful to me, and just results in better outcomes for everyone at the organization. So yeah, keep following Wildsparq for those types of incredible insights. And honestly, that was a perfect segue into something that we're going to talk about in just a moment here. But I'm moving on to my tier 2 AI solutions here. One quick insight, again, referring back to that McKinsey study. I thought this was really fascinating. I'll describe it this way. People, and when they're asked about their own organizations and then other institutions, whether it's other businesses, whether it's civic or governmental organizations, in general, people say that they're 30% more trusting of the organizations they work for to implement generative AI and AI solutions at large at their companies versus from other sources. All that to say, people tend to trust their own companies to do AI right. And so again, this is an exciting analysis that's showing there is a readiness for these solutions and some trust from that front. So almost a perfect setup from the Wildsparq future tool that will be emerging around this is this idea of intelligent knowledge capture. I try to refer to tools throughout these just so you have a reference point. This isn't an explicit endorsement, but this is just trying to get you all a sense of the categories so you can do your own research. Core.ai, Acera are examples. What we're talking about when we're talking about intelligent knowledge capture is pretty much what David referred to, creating an AI chatbot specific to a certain function or a certain situation within that would foreseeably happen within our organization. I have a few examples that I'll share in a moment, but to me, a good example, a nice one that everyone can relate to, is this idea of a sales team and a new product or service launch. Because as we all know, whatever industry we're in, whether it's construction, whether it's more financial, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's IT, there can be a ton of new information to sort through when we have a new product or service launch, from all the tech specs to all the warranty type of information. And that is extremely challenging for someone to start talking about and, again, memorizing pages, binders full of documentation, hence the incredible value of an AI chatbot type tool that has all that information on the fly. But also highly valuable when we talk about leadership development. Again, this is basically exactly what Wildsparq is going to be debuting, a leadership coach assistant. Also, other different lenses could be interesting too, such as regulatory compliance advisor. Who wouldn't rather turn to that than opening up their compliance binder of hundreds of pages that we have to keep an eye on? And again, I'm not saying never verify. Of course, we want to make sure that we're sussing these out. But turning to that chatbot first could be a really incredible game changer. Another underrated one, just smart mentoring. So the ability to use tools like Together or MentorClick to look beyond what I think of when I think of traditional mentoring. Good news is Gen Z, the youngest generation in the workforce currently, is very intrigued and very receptive. About 83% of them see mentoring as highly valuable to their careers. So there's still very much interest in mentoring. But again, a lot of times traditional mentoring, it goes sort of up the corporate ladder, right? It goes, meet with your manager's manager, or someone who used to do your job, which is fine and can be incredibly valuable. But tools like this can look a little bit deeper, Look about what's motivating you. Look at what you're looking to do at your career in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line. And also looking at some of the more elusive things, such as soft skills. Maybe you don't want to really dig into the technical elements of your job. Maybe what you really want to lean into next is how to be a leader, how to run a meeting, how to do a performance review. Again, all things Wildsparq can help with as well. And also these mentoring tools helping create those connections to walk through someone who might not be in your department, might not be in your branch, might be across the world, depending on if you're an international organization, but they might be the best person to help you learn that skill or that trait. So this one just gets me so excited because it really helps us create deeper relationships and create more insights throughout our organization. I already pretty much talked about those two elements there. When we talk about knowledge markets, I've been talking about this a lot. I want to emphasize that it is critical. Even getting back to that knowledge capture that we talked about at the first principle of these AI tools, it is critical that we really emphasize as leaders the importance of doing this regularly and allowing our teams to schedule time to do that. Because if we don't, you know what happens. People don't actually ever do it. It's important that we have these to be very accessible, whether it's on our laptops, whether it's on our mobile devices. Obviously, we know, especially among digital natives, but really among all generations, the importance of being able to access something on the fly on your mobile device. I want to share a cool story. I think gamifying the process, I think creating levels, badges, rewards, points is an incredible way to make this a more compelling option. I've got a story queued up in just a moment. Again, just for some reference points to some categories here, things like Guru or Stack Overflow, Yext, IT Glue are all examples. Do your own research on which ones make the most sense. But this example is from Cisco. They had 4,000 technical support engineers around the world. And they knew they had that 40% or perhaps an even higher number of that knowledge stored in people's brains that wasn't in their platform. And they really wanted to incentivize people to do that. So they created this brilliant idea of a knowledge champions league, essentially modeled off of European soccer or football leagues, as it were. And they created these teams around the world, and people were incentivized because the winners, the ones who created the most new resources of high value, they would be rewarded with a 2-week paid, I don't want to call it vacation because they did still have to work, but they were allowed to do a 2-week trip to any one of the other offices around the world that Cisco had people employed at. So essentially a working vacation. And people really got into this program, and I love the incentivization there. They created 5 times more resources than people who were not part of this Champions League, which resulted in over 1 million views on the content that they created. And so critically, they doubled their case deflection savings from roughly 27 million to 54 million, as in people who didn't otherwise need technical support because they had created those high impact, high value resources for people to reference. I just think that's so cool, a really fun and high value example for the low cost of allowing someone to go travel to another office. And then targeted process documentation. This is the last one I'll lean into today. I know we've covered a lot of AI solutions, tools like Solanas or Automation Anywhere. The idea here is we are using these tools to analyze processes that we do repeatedly at our organization. So this is an overlying AI that's able to monitor that. So things like onboarding a new client or running through some sort of financial setup, running through a sales call. Pretty much the options are endless. Customer support. It's going to analyze how people are doing things, and it's going to start to recognize who or create a compilation of who's performing the best and create a best possible outcomes, best standard operating procedure that we then can replicate around our organization. This can also be done, of course, on a leadership perspective, looking at the leaders who have the most productivity or creating the biggest impact and looking at their workflow and how can we mirror that among other rungs of our organization, and also analyzing something that can oftentimes be extremely subtle, but their decision-making patterns, and being able to start to recognize that and create potential resources and architectures around that we can, again, distribute across our organization, hopefully make everyone more productive, or at least give them that reference point. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to be fit perfectly into those same boxes, but it gives them a lens that they would never have had before as to people who are doing this on a really successful level. So in conclusion to our AI section, I do encourage you, when you are rolling out implementations like this, start small, but do start. So, and I know based on the survey responses that many of y'all are very much starting. So that's awesome. Start with the low-hanging fruit. Be very targeted. Don't roll it out organizationally. Start with a small team, a small department, and take it from there. Document everything and celebrate those wins. Make sure people know what results you are achieving from implementing these AI solutions at your organization. Cool. So I know we're coming up on time here. Let me bring it home to a quick call to action, and then happy to continue the conversation. But as a reminder, we've got a lot of generations of the workforce. The mix is changing very rapidly. Gen Z increasingly taking up a larger percentage of the workforce. We also have this ticking clock of the retirement crisis of our baby boomer generation and being able to capture the knowledge from them. And of course, a little thing called AI thrown in the mix among all of this here today. So this is a reminder of our big scary number of money that costs large businesses in the US due to inefficient knowledge sharing, but as our more relatable figure, that at 5 hours a week, resulting in potentially 20 to 30% of revenue. So I hope I gave y'all some ideas on how to leverage these amazing AI technologies to improve our human-to-human experiences at our organizations. Again, my name is Luke Goetting. I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. In fact, I'm in the chat there, so please do connect with me. If you have any unanswered questions that we don't cover, I'm happy to continue the conversation with you. Obviously, we have so much more to talk about in this talk and some of my other talks. I also have a TEDx talk. I speak at management events, leadership trainings, and conferences around the world, including my Unlocking Gen Z talk, which does a deep dive on how managers and leaders can best connect with the newest generation in the workforce. I mentioned a bunch of these free resources. I'm going to make that available right now to y'all. If you would be willing to fill out the survey, let me know what you thought of today's session. That is going to be live on Slido right now. You can just scan the QR code there, or you can access the link that I posted in the LinkedIn chat so that you're able to get any of those resources that you'd like. And also, and by the way, this will stay live if you're accessing it not right now, as in if you're accessing it on demand after we record this. So feel free to fill that out or connect with me on LinkedIn to get any of those resources. Thanks again, y'all. Really appreciate your time. Let me throw it out back to my amazing co-hosts, David and Alex.
Awesome. Luke, thank you so much, man. That was great. So much practical tools and solutions. I have like 3 things written down that I'm putting into action like immediately.
Awesome. So glad to hear that.
Utilizing some of those tools because I hadn't heard about a lot of those, but and thank you so much just for your insights. I'm gonna have you come back and do another one of those topics because I'm interested in those too. Everybody tuning in, thank you for joining. We will make this recording available to share out, and take that cheat sheet and use it. Listen to Luke's podcast. And what's the date of your new book coming out?
Yeah, good question. No, it'll be hopefully late summer. Like I'll kind of mirror your AI rollout comments there. Hopefully late summer, early fall. Putting the final touches on it, we'll say.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Luke. Everybody else in the chat, thank you for joining. And we'll catch you guys next time for an executive live session with Wildsparq.
Thanks, y'all.